was invisible to my own family. That's the truth nobody wanted to say at my 82nd birthday dinner. My daughter Jessica checked her phone 6 times during the meal. My son Michael talked about his promotion for 20 minutes without asking how I was doing. My youngest Sarah kept glancing at the door like she was planning her escape. When the cake came out, they sang Happy Birthday with the enthusiasm of people reading a grocery list. I smiled and nodded and thanked them, but inside I was screaming. These people shared my blood, my name, my history. But sitting at that table, surrounded by my children and grandchildren, I felt more alone than I had since Martha died 3 years earlier. The sound of forks scraping plates filled the silence where conversation should have been. The smell of vanilla frosting couldn't mask the bitter taste of being forgotten by the people who were supposed to love me most. That night, after everyone left and the house fell back into its familiar quiet, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to join the chess club at the community center. Not because I was particularly good at chess. I hadn't played since high school, and even then I was mediocre at best. But I needed something, anything, to fill the endless hours between waking up and going to bed. I needed to be around people who might actually want me there. The Riverside Community Center smelled like disinfectant and coffee when I walked through those glass doors for the first time. My hands were shaking slightly as I approached the front desk, where a young woman with bright blue hair was typing on a computer that looked more advanced than anything we had when I worked at Boeing for 37 years. "Excuse me," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "I'm interested in the chess club." She looked up with a smile that seemed genuine. "Oh, that's wonderful. They meet every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 o'clock. Room B12, down the hall and to your right. Harold will be thrilled to have another player." Harold turned out to be a 74-year-old retired mailman with thick glasses and a laugh that could probably be heard in the parking lot. When I introduced myself that first Tuesday, he slapped me on the back so hard I nearly lost my balance. "Welcome to the madhouse, friend," he said, gesturing to a room filled with 8 tables, each with its own chess set. "Fair warning, we take this seriously here, but not so seriously that we can't have fun." The other members introduced themselves one by one. There was Dorothy, 81, who had been teaching elementary school for 45 years before retiring. She had the sharpest mind I'd encountered in decades and could spot a mistake 3 moves before you made it. Frank, 77, was a Korean War veteran who spoke in quiet tones, but had eyes that missed nothing. Margaret, 79, had raised 6 children and ran a daycare for 20 years after that. She brought homemade cookies every meeting and remembered everyone's birthday. And then there was Elena, 85, who had immigrated from Italy in the 1960s and still spoke with an accent thick as honey. She made the best coffee any of us had ever tasted, and wasn't shy about telling you exactly what she thought about your opening strategy. These people were strangers. I knew nothing about their families, their histories, their struggles. But within 3 weeks, something remarkable began to happen. They started to see me, not as someone's father or grandfather or husband or employee, just as myself. When I made a particularly clever move, Harold would whistle low and say, "Look at this guy, sneaking up on us like that." When I told Dorothy about my years designing airplane parts, her eyes lit up with genuine curiosity. "Tell me about the most challenging project you ever worked on," she said, leaning forward like my answer actually mattered to her. I found myself talking more in those first few chess meetings than I had in months at home. I told Frank about my tour in Vietnam, something I had never fully shared with my children, because they seemed uncomfortable whenever the subject came up. Frank understood the weight of those memories without me having to explain. He just nodded and said, "Different war, same demons, brother." Margaret asked about Martha, my wife of 53 years, and actually listened when I told her about the way Martha used to hum while she cooked breakfast, how she left little notes in my lunchbox, even after we'd been married for decades. Margaret didn't change the subject or check her phone. She just listened, and when I was done, she squeezed my hand and said, "She sounds like she was a treasure." Most people walk away when stories get this heavy. The fact that you're still listening, that means something. The chess itself became secondary to these conversations that happened between moves. We would sit at those wooden tables, moving pieces across black and white squares. But what we were really doing was moving pieces of ourselves toward each other. Elena would tell us about leaving everything behind in Tuscany to come to America with nothing but a suitcase and a prayer. Harold would share stories about his route, the families he watched grow up through 30 years of delivering their mail. Dorothy would describe the satisfaction of watching a struggling student finally understand a concept she'd been trying to teach for weeks. These weren't just stories. They were offerings. They were trust made tangible. And slowly, impossibly, I began to offer pieces of myself in return. I told them about the loneliness that had been eating at me since Martha died, about feeling like a ghost in my own life, present but not really there, about watching my children grow into strangers who felt obligated to visit but didn't seem to enjoy it, about the silence in my house that pressed against my chest some days until I could barely breathe. They didn't try to fix me or give me advice or tell me everything happens for a reason. They just listened and nodded and understood, because they were fighting their own battles with time and loss and the particular kind of invisibility that comes with getting old in a world that worships youth. Thursday became the day I looked forward to most. Tuesday was good, but by Thursday I was hungry for their company in a way that surprised me. I would arrive early just to help set up the boards, partly to be useful, but mostly because I craved those few extra minutes of belonging somewhere. Elena would always be there first, brewing her coffee in the little kitchen area. "Buongiorno, my friend," she would say, and the warmth in her voice would carry me through whatever loneliness the week had brought. 6 months after joining, something happened that crystallized everything for me. I had been having chest pains for a few days, but hadn't told anyone because, honestly, who was there to tell? My children all lived their busy lives in different cities, and calling them with every ache and pain seemed like a burden I didn't want to place on them. But during one Thursday game with Frank, the pain got sharp enough that I must have winced visibly. Frank stopped mid-move. "You okay there, partner?" I tried to wave it off, but he wasn't having it. Within minutes, the entire group had circled around me. Harold called 911. Margaret held my hand while we waited for the ambulance. Dorothy gathered my personal items and made sure the chess set was put away properly. Elena called her son-in-law, who was a doctor, to ask what questions the paramedics should be asking. They rode with me to the hospital, all of them. Harold drove Elena and Margaret. Dorothy rode with Frank. They filled up the waiting room while the doctors ran tests and figured out that I was dealing with some minor heart irregularities that needed monitoring but weren't immediately dangerous. When the cardiologist came out to explain my condition, he assumed they were my family. "Your father is going to be fine," he told Harold, who was sitting closest to the door. Harold didn't correct him. Neither did any of the others. They just nodded and asked the right questions and took notes about my medications and follow-up appointments. My actual children found out about my hospital visit 3 days later, when Jessica called for her monthly check-in. I had to tell her about it because Elena had sent flowers to my house, and Jessica noticed them when she stopped by to drop off some groceries. "Dad, why didn't you call us?" she asked, and I could hear the hurt in her voice, mixed with something that might have been guilt. "I had people taking care of me," I said simply, and I did. I had people who knew that I took my coffee black with 1 sugar. People who remembered that I had served in Vietnam and worked at Boeing and lost my wife to cancer. People who noticed when I was in pain and acted without being asked. People who called to check on me the day after I got home from the hospital, and the day after that, and the day after that. There are more stories I need to get off my chest. If you want to hear them, hit subscribe. I'll be here. The truth is, my children love me. I know they do. But love and knowing someone are not the same thing. My children love the idea of me, the father-shaped space in their lives that I occupy. But Dorothy knows that I prefer chess problems to regular games because I like puzzles more than competition. Harold knows that I still dream about Martha and wake up reaching for her side of the bed. Frank knows that I carry guilt about things I did in the war that I've never spoken about to anyone else. Margaret knows that I'm afraid of becoming a burden to my children, so afraid that I would rather suffer alone than ask for help. Elena knows that I cry sometimes on Sundays because that was the day Martha and I used to read the paper together and plan our week. These strangers, these Tuesday and Thursday companions, have taken the time to learn the language of who I am. Not who I was to them or who they need me to be, but who I actually am. At 87 years old, I am known, really, truly known. And that knowledge has given me something I thought I had lost forever when Martha died. The feeling of being fully alive, fully present, fully seen. The chess club didn't just fill my empty hours. It filled the empty spaces inside me that I hadn't even realized were there. It reminded me that I am more than just somebody's father or grandfather. I am Harold's friend who brings interesting newspaper clippings to share. I am Dorothy's student who is finally learning proper endgame technique. I am Frank's brother-in-arms who understands the weight of old wars. I am Margaret's confidant who listens to her stories about her grandchildren. I am Elena's taste tester who gets the first sip of whatever new coffee blend she's trying. I am myself, fully and completely, in ways I hadn't been in years. My children visit more often now, maybe because they sense something different in me, some lightness that wasn't there before. When they come for dinner, I tell them stories about my chess friends, and sometimes I catch them actually listening. Last month, Michael asked if he could come to a chess meeting with me. He's terrible at the game, but Harold was patient with him, and Dorothy complimented his concentration. Elena made him her special espresso, and Margaret sent him home with cookies. He called me the next day to thank me for including him. "I never realized you had such a full life, Dad," he said. "You seem happy." I am happy. Not every day, not every moment, but in a way that feels sustainable and real. I am happy because I matter to people who choose to spend time with me, not because they have to, but because they want to. I am happy because every Tuesday and Thursday I have somewhere to be, and people to be with who are genuinely glad to see me. I am happy because at 87 years old, I am still learning new things about myself and about life and about the surprising ways that strangers can become family. The chess pieces on my table are the same black and white as they were 5 years ago when I first walked into that community center. But everything else has changed. I have changed. I am no longer invisible, no longer forgotten, no longer alone in a room full of people who share my DNA but not my heart. I am seen and known, and valued by people who had no obligation to care about me, but chose to anyway. And that choice, repeated every Tuesday and Thursday for 5 years now, has taught me that family is not just about blood. Family is about showing up. Family is about paying attention. Family is about choosing each other again and again until that choice becomes love.